Hi everyone, and welcome to the Book Refuge, and welcome to my April wrap-up part 1. I've had to get a little creative with how I'm gonna do this wrap-up today because, as has been the pattern the last few months, currently today we're only like a third of the way through the month, and I have 27 books to talk about today. So the way I decided to do this is that for every book that got less than 5 stars, I'm going to show it to you, tell you what the actual rating was, and give you kind of like 1 to 2 sentences about what it was about. Then, if you would like me to go into more detail with you, if you want, a few more deeper feelings about how I felt about it, you can either check out my Goodreads, which is always down below, or you can just leave a comment here and ask, and then I will make it, I won't do like spoilers or anything, but I will write out more specifics, just because I feel like not every single one of these 27 books is someone gonna need a 5-minute explanation about, and the books that I did give 5 stars to, I like to go into more detail about why I think it's worth your time. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to go through all the books that got 4.5 or less stars, and we're going to kind of speak about them kind of quickly. And then I have, I think 8 books that got 5 stars so far, and I'm going to go into more details about them. So let's get started. One of my first reads of the month, this book got 4.5 stars, was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book is about Vanessa, who when she was 15 years old, she started being groomed and then eventually raped and molested by her English teacher at her private boarding school. And so this book takes place both in the past when this is starting and in the present in 2017 when more and more allegations have come out against this man who Vanessa has complicated and obsessive feelings over. This was dark. There are many trigger warnings. Please look them up before you read it. This was 4.5 stars to me. I very much enjoyed it. It was very heavy though. It was hard for me to get through. Next, I finished this right at the beginning of the month too, is A Court of Thorns and Roses. This I gave 4 stars this time around. I already have a detailed review up for this. It came up last week. You can find it. I'll go ahead and link it above, where I am starting a full deep dive of the series as I reread the books for the 3rd time. I really want to do like character studies and things like that. But this time around, this got a 4 star for me. Still really enjoyed it. But it is obvious to me that as the first book in a series, it's not super strong, but still enjoy her world so much. Then I have Frostbite by David Wellington. This was one of my books that I ended up picking during my TBR game as a book that I had little hope for. I ended up giving this 3 stars. This is a horror novel about a girl who gets turned into a werewolf. There you go. Next, I have Falling into Bed with a Duke. This is the first book in the Hellions of Havisham. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This book is about a girl who wants to find out what sex is about, so she goes to the Nightingale Club where women can have anonymous sexual experiences, and she meets a man who likes to photograph women's ankles. This was pretty fun. Then we have a 4 star, and that is Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Clayface. This is the first book in the Wallflower series. Okay, technically it's not, which I found out later on, because there's actually another book in the series called Again the Magic, which happens before this, but it's not actually considered a wallflower, but it's still about the same family. It's confusing. This one I gave 4 stars because Simon Hunt is a little bit too pushy for me. However, this was very sexy. I really loved Annabelle. Annabelle is trying to find a rich husband, or else she will need to be someone's mistress. So she's making a last-ditch attempt to get married and save her family. Still very good. Then we have the third one in this series, which, spoiler alert, you're going to see the other ones in the 5-star part. We have Devil in Winter. This supposedly is most people's favorite. It was okay. I feel like Sebastian was built up too much for me. So, he was fun, but I had issues with him in certain respects. So, this one got a 4-star for me as well. But this is about Evie. She has a stutter. Her family is very controlling. And after an event that Sebastian is a part of in the previous book, which I'll talk about more in depth in my 5-star part, she desperately goes to him and they begin a marriage of convenience. And I love those kind of stories. Next I have Then Comes Marriage. This I gave 4 stars. This is the second book in the Wicked Worthington series. You will see the first one shortly. This is about twins, Castor and Pole, who both end up falling for the same woman. And when they realize that, they ask her to choose one of them. But she has to date both of them fairly first, because they don't want any brother trouble between them by having her, pick one of them without giving them both a chance. It's fun. It's cute. The Wicked Worthingtons are going to be a great ride for you. Celeste Bradley, she knows how to ride it. That's for sure. Then we have Misconduct. I gave this 4 stars. This is by Penelope Douglas. This is an age gap between a teacher and one of her students' parents. This is a 10-year age gap. She is 26 and he is 36. Pretty good. Then we have Lair of Dreams by Liva Bray. This was 4.5 stars. This is the second book in the Diviner series. This is a very slow build-up. There is mystery, magic, mysticism. There is racism and prejudices, and a full cast of characters who we are watching grow and develop, and I'm very excited to continue this series. Only reason this isn't a 5-star is it took me a very long time to stay interested, because it does bounce around a lot, and if you can't zone in on it and cruise through it, for me it just started to drag because of that. But I still really appreciated it. I gave it 4.5 stars. There we go. Next, I had Lowdown Dirty by Holly Trent. This I gave 4 stars. This is about a boat builder and a architect. They meet in this small town, and they both have been burned by the BDSM scene in the past, but they're both extremely attracted to each other and want to give it another try. Next, we have Out in the Open by A.J. Truman. I gave this 3.5 stars. Found this book when I was looking for male authors who've written romance. This is a male-male romance between a pretty shy, nerdy gay man. They're in college. This is a college romance. And a more outgoing football player who's in a fraternity. And they kind of start having weird hookups. It was 3.5 stars because it was a number one, one of them is in the closet. And I really didn't like how he treated his love interest. It just kind of bothered me, but it was pretty well written as well. And this one was on Kindle Unlimited. Then I have Butterface by Avery Flynn. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This is the first book in the O'Flattery or O'Flanagan series. This one is about a woman who her family is kind of a crime family, but she doesn't participate in that. And then she's renovating her grandfather's old house, and she discovers his body in the wall. Not what you'd think by looking at this cover, I know. But then a police detective and her end up kind of fake dating so he can find out what happened to her grandfather. Read Welcome to the Dark Side by Gianna Darling. I gave this 4 stars. This is an age gap romance between a motorcycle kingpin and a 17-year-old girl. They first meet when she's a child and she gets shot and he saves her. But then he goes to prison, and so she writes letters to him until she realizes she's in love with him, and he cuts off communication. And then she tries to get him back. This one is a little bit on the edge of where I think an age gap is appropriate, but it was very sexy and interesting. Also, check out the trigger warnings before reading this. Next, I read Black Veil by Kate Avery Ellison. This was a very anticipated book for me. I gave it 4.5 stars. The reason it wasn't 5 stars, I'm getting kind of sick of how some things are being dragged out, especially now that I know there is 5 books at least in this series. Also, I don't have too much to say because this is the 3rd book in the series, but 4.5 stars. This series starts with Red Rider. You should really check it out. It is kind of like a sci-fi fantasy dystopian. It's all these things. Also a Red Riding Hood retelling. There is werewolves and it's amazing. So check that out. Next, I read Big Man by Penny Wilder. I gave this 4 stars. This is about a woman who inherits a farm and the land from, I think it's her grandfather or uncle, I can't remember. But he left it to her and the neighbor, who is this beautiful lumbersexual, and they have to work together to make something of the place. And also, it's called Big Man because he has a really big dick. There you go. The next 2 books I read were Treasure of the Abyss and Jewel of the Sea by Tiffany Roberts. I read these because my friends at Romance Takeover, they really wanted us to try these tentacle erotica, and I did. I gave them both 3 stars. Not because I was too creeped out, because when you're reading it, it's all right, but the story as a whole, what was going on, I just wasn't that interested, so I probably won't continue past these. But never knock an alien or tentacle or any of those things until you try it, because it's very interesting. Very interesting. And then, actually forgot one that was a 4-star, and that is Seduce Me at Sunrise by Lisa Clayface. This is actually the only one in this series. This is the 2nd book in the Hathaway series that I didn't give 5 stars to, so we're going to talk about the other ones in just a minute. This one is about Kev and Wynn, and they've known each other their whole lives, and he's a half Romani gypsy, and she's had chronic illness, and so... But they love each other. I don't know what else to say because I'm trying to keep this quick. But this series, we're going to talk about it. Okay, so those are all the books that got less than 5 stars. Now let's dive into the ones that did. And heads up, it's mostly historical romance, and it's a good time. So let us start, though, with the ones that aren't. So let's start with a book that I just read, and that is Stealing Cinderella by A. Zavarelli. And obviously now you know all the rest of these are 5 stars. So if I forget to say it, they're 5 stars. This is part of the fairy tale, the dark fairy tale retelling series. I've had a mixed relationship with this back in the beginning of the year. It might have even been early last year. I really liked Cold Queen. I really liked one other one, but mostly the books in the series have been just a little too odd for me. They haven't fit into any demographic I was interested in. However, this one fits into a lot of them. So this is about, this is a Cinderella retelling. This girl is trying to, she lives with her stepmother and 2 stepsisters. And in this case, one of her stepsisters is actually the more evil of the group. And this girl, she has been tortured at different points. Ella has. She has been abused, burned, treated poorly for a very long time. Her stepmother blames her for her father's death because she was there when it happened and he died saving her life. She ends up, so the Prince of Norway ends up coming to town and they're having a ball. He's supposed to find a wife, you know, that classic thing. And she ends up sneaking into this party under her friend's name. Her friend gives her ticket, and she's trying to get funding for an animal sanctuary. And she runs into him. He is instantly very attracted to her. And they have a couple interactions, and she loses her shoe. And then he comes around trying to find her. And now here's the thing, though. This guy, Thor, his name is Thor from Norway. He's very angry and very just has a lot of weight on his shoulders, and he's looking for a place to kind of put that anger. And so he's into certain levels of BDSM. However, I don't think he fully understands it right. So there's that. But anyway, through this or that or whatever, he ends up finding Ella again, and he drugs her and kidnaps her and brings her to his home. And then he offers her a deal. So she is saying yes to this, but not to the drug part. So remember that as a trigger warning. He totally doses her with ketamine. That happens. These are all very dark though, so if you have trigger warnings or issues with like dubious consent or problems like that, you shouldn't read this series at all, because every single one in the book has had some form of that. That's just the kind of tales they're telling. So he offers her a deal that the rest of the time he's in the country, which is for 2 months, he will pay her literally $1,000 a day to be his sex slave. That's what it is, right? And he will save the animal sanctuary if she will do this for him and do everything he says. And she says yes, because she also wants to sleep with him anyway. So she agrees to do this. So yeah, but it just became so intense. The way A. Zavarelli is able to do this. I knew I was going to like this one. This is one of the books I was actually waiting for in the series, because like I said, I've kind of given up on the other ones. But I've read A. Zavarelli before, and she wrecked me. And so I knew that this would be good. And she manages to take this guy that you're like, how will I like him? Am I just going to have to be cool? Is this a captor-slave romance? Like, what is this? But it is at the beginning, and then it isn't, because this is still a choice. Like, besides the initial drugging, which, again, I'm not excusing, it's horrible, she agrees to everything. And I just have a serious kink for that anyway. And then when you find out the things that he's dealing with, and there's also a thrilling aspect because her stepsister is who he ends up having like a faux relationship with in the tabloids, and she's very manipulative. And so we're kind of warring against her, and we're warring against all these things, and it's so good. There is also a trigger warning for assisted suicide in here. I won't tell you who that's with or what's going on, but I want to tell you those trigger warnings. So yeah, there's definitely dubious consent. There's definitely abuse from family members. As well as abusive relationship, but that's what you're getting into with these kind of books. And then yeah, assisted suicide was kind of a big trigger for me, but the story was handling it in a very interesting way. So that's a 5-star. Then let's talk about the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. So I'm so glad I finally read this. It's taken me too long, but this book is, I've talked about it in like the last like 4 videos I've talked about, but this is about Gavin Scott, and he finds out one day that his wife has been faking orgasms. And if that wasn't bad enough, the fact that he didn't notice is a huge contention, and his wife is ready to leave him. But he loves his wife, and he knows that he messed up. And so his friends actually read romance novels, and they rope him into this and say, if you do what we say, you have a chance to save your marriage if you will fight for her using these techniques that we find in romance novels. And so within this book, you're also reading parts of the Viscount courting the Countess, I think is what it is. And so Gavin does his best to follow these rules. And so I love marriage and trouble stories. They're one of my favorite. I love when a couple can work through things. This was sexy and funny and just so heartwarming. And you're never in doubt that these two people love each other. So there isn't that kind of angst. This is just real life, true blue. This stuff happens. This isn't a fantasy. This is like a cold look at reality. And I loved it so much. So this was an absolute 5-star for me. I had such a great time with it. All right, let's get into the historical romance. I am so excited. So first one I want to talk about that's a 5-star is The Earl Takes All. So this is the second book in the Hellions of Havisham series. And this one follows the falling in bed with a duke. And this book is about Edward and Lady Julia. And Edward's brother Albert they go on a trip to Africa together, and his brother Albert dies. Now, they are twin brothers, identical twin brothers. And Albert's wife, Julia, is at home pregnant, and she has lost 3 babies previously. She's now like 4 or 5 months along, and he's very worried about her losing this child. So while he is dying, he asks his brother to, it's a sudden death too. Like, he didn't know he was dying, but when the thing happens, he's then like dying for a amount of time. He asks his brother Edward to impersonate him so that his wife won't find out he's dead until after the baby's born. So already I could just kick Albert in the face because come on, Albert. And also, if the baby's a boy, the baby will be the next Earl. So he's protecting his line as well. So Edward comes home and he pretends that he's the one who's dead. So they tell everyone that Edward was the one who died and that Albert came home. And we're already in a very like sad place because people didn't really respect Edward. Edward kind of made a fool of himself and was kind of a rake, and he hadn't done anything meaningful yet in his life. And so him playing his brother has all these people like saying, "Oh, we're so glad it wasn't you." And all these people are saying these things to his face, and it's just, it hurts you so much. But then we come to the real trouble, and that is Julia, Julia and Edward have always had a very contentious relationship because before she married Albert, Edward and Julia had a moment where they kissed, and they were very, he's always been very attracted to her. And to respect his brother, he's went about it in a kind of a weird way where he's kind of mean to Julia and rude and just kind of keeping that distance so that she never would really fall for him or like him or anything. And so now he has to fight against all of that. And number one, he is choosing to lie to this woman to protect the baby. And in the process, he's falling even more deeply in love with a woman who doesn't even know that it's him, and will always contribute everything that he does to his brother. I will tell you about this book that I did not know how it could possibly work out. There's also a law in England at that time that you couldn't marry your brother's widow. So that's another reason why his brother had asked him to be him, because, you know, Edward was like, well, I would take care of her no matter what. And he's like, yes, but you can't marry her because you're my brother. So if he were to ever reveal himself and share that I actually love you, he couldn't be with her because they were brother and sister-in-law. This book is full of so much angst, and it gives you a pit in your stomach because you start out thinking Edward is an ass, and you're like, how is this gonna be good? And then once you do feel for him, you're like, dude, you are building this on a lie. It's all gonna come crumbling down around you. But you see in his heart and in his mind, and you see his reasons for doing things, and you are just fighting for them so much. And you're fighting for Julia, and you love her, and you just want her to be happy. And you know that there's this bomb hanging over her where her husband's dead this whole time and she doesn't know it. And just, it's so good, guys. This book, I cried, I laughed, I was aching. It's so good. Lorraine Heath, I've only read 2 of her books, and already I know she's going to be a favorite because her stories, neither of them are conventional. They don't follow tropes I've seen before, and I love it. So please, if you've read too many historical romances that seem all the same, but you love the genre, you should try Lorraine Heath. I have her entire other series, one of her other series too, that I can't wait to read. I have the 3rd book in this series to read, and I can't wait. I'm excited. All right, next I have When She Said I Do by Celeste Bradley. This was a reread for me. I talk pretty extensively about this book in my Romance Takeover Buddy Read vlog because that's when I read this book, and I love it so much. So the premise of this is that we have Callie, who her and her family get in an accident one night, and they stumble into this manor house. All of them. and there's a lot of them. This is the first in the Wicked Worthington series, and there are 9 siblings, and I'm so happy about it. So happy about it. And there is a man who lives here whose name is Ren, and Ren is an injured hero. He has burns on part of his body. His spine is curved a little bit from misuse. He has war-torn muscles, and he's slowly going crazy in his home. Like, he has sent away all the servants, and a doctor told him that he will die soon. And so he's kind of just waiting to die, and he's half delirious. And Callie and her family stumble into his home, and Callie stumbles in to a room. She lights a fire. She's starting to warm herself, and she finds this box of jewels literally just sitting on the table, and there is this necklace of pearls. And she just like tries it on because she doesn't see anyone, and she isn't planning to take it, but she tries it on, and then Ren comes in. And again, Ren is half delirious, but he does kind of start to maul her because he thinks she's an angel and thinks that he's dreaming. And yeah, he's kind of sick. He's kind of sick up here right now. And anyway, they get caught in a situation by her brother. And so her brother immediately challenges Ren to a duel. And so the next morning, they're going to have a duel. And Ren wants her brother to kill him. So he doesn't even draw his pistol. And Callie just can't. She just can't do it. So she jumps in front of Ren, stops her brother because she doesn't want her brother to go to prison and be hanged for killing someone. And she doesn't think Ren deserves to die just because he got a little carried away with her. And so he had, when he was touching her and making her feel things, he had said, "Oh, so you want my pearls, darling? What would you do for them? Would you give me a night of pleasure for each little pearl that I give you?" And so she jumps onto that moment and she tells her family, he agreed to marry me. So you don't have to kill him. He's going to make me his wife. I'm going to marry him and it's going to be fine. And so they get married. And then Ren, again, this man, this is so hard. Like, it's so hard. He thinks he's going to die and he doesn't really care about anything. And so he makes her this deal that for each act of pleasure that they have together, he will give her one of the pearls back. And when she has all the pearls back, she can take them and leave because he's planning to die. But that doesn't last for long because these two have an incredible connection. This book also has some amazing elements of BDSM that are not talked about as such, but they totally are. In the submission aspect, for sure. Ren will, ask her to be still when he does things because, number one, he doesn't want her to touch his scars. He doesn't want her to see what he looks like. He's very self-conscious about this. And Callie wants to give up control so bad because she's the oldest sibling and she's always had to be in charge. And her parents are lovely, but they're a little bit loony and her family's poor. And so she's always had to be responsible. And she loves giving up control to Ren. And it is so sexy and so beautiful. And as Callie starts to put his home back together and starts to excite him and draw him out and want to spend time with him, we see all these amazing things happen. And so this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's one of the most beautiful ones I've seen done in historical romance. It is so touching. Celeste Bradley will break you, and it's so good. So good. All right, here we go. We're getting into the Lisa Clayface, guys. Aren't you excited? Woo! All right, so I finally read the Wallflower series. I actually just have left the one that is kind of like a prequel to these. But I read Secrets of a Summer Night, which you just saw. And then I read It Happened One Autumn. And this book is about Westcliff and Lillian, whom I was very excited about because I've read about them in other of Lisa's books. I kind of have done her series backwards and I've kind of been going the opposite direction, not on purpose, but I've read the Ravenels, which happens, 20 years after this. And I actually read the series I'm going to talk about next before this one, so I've read a lot about these guys. I freaking loved this. Pretty much all of the Wallflower series is hate to love books. They all start with pretty strong antagonism and then lead into just, so good. Like, I don't even know what to say. It's so great. But this one is about Lillian, and she's an American, and she needs to find a husband. And Westcliff, this party, which we've seen him already in the previous book, and he's just so sick of these fortune hunting wallflowers who are just trying to get rich husbands, and he's just so sick of it until he starts to interact with Lillian in some more meaningful ways. And Lillian just gives him so much crap. Like, her ballsy, in your face, you're not going to tell me what to do attitude is amazing. And it gets her into some interesting things. Like, specifically, she's going to go on a hunt with them, and she's riding side saddle, and she wants to take this jumping course that he owns because she loves jumping. But she's doing it side saddle, and he's like, it's not safe for you. Another time I can walk you through the course ahead of time and then you can do it. But he's just worried about her safety. And not just because she's a woman, but because she's his guest, and because he knows that she normally likes to ride Western style, and he just like wants her to be safe, and she does it. And so he drags her off her horse and forbids her to ride any of his horses the rest of the time that she's at his house. And it just is so good. Like, Westcliff is probably I can't even say he's my favorite because I love so many of hers, but I love him because he has such a chip, and like, you understand his chip that's on his shoulder. Also, his mother is a horrible bitch, and his father raised him to not have any emotions and was a really cruel man. So the fact that he has love at all is just so beautiful to see. But this one was freaking amazing, and watching them like fall for each other was so good. And then we have the other sibling, which is Daisy Bowman. So she's the younger sibling. And this book, guys, this one was hard. This is Scandal in Spring, and this one, we start with Daisy and her father, again, who's an American. He is like a perfume, I think he owns like perfume manufacturing, and anyway, he's super rich. He is tired of Daisy not having a husband. He calls her literally a waste of resources, and she's a drain on him, and he needs to find her a husband to take her off his hands. And so he has found a husband for her, which is one of his employees who he wants to take over his business because none of his sons show enough interest in the business. And so there's this man named Matthew Swift who he has kind of trained up as his protege. Daisy has known Matthew for the last, it's 8 or 10 years or something like that. And she just has a really bad, idea of him. But Matthew has liked her almost the whole time. He thought she's so lively and beautiful, and he's purposely stayed away from her. Because Matthew has some things in his past that he's scared to love someone. He's scared of what it would mean for them if he's ever found out. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that I have secrets I can never tell you about trope. However, Matthew's, when you find out what they are, I understood why he kept them from her. I really do. However, this one is beautiful because Daisy, she doesn't want to marry Matthew. And again, Matthew doesn't want to marry anyone, even though he likes Daisy. So her father is going to give her 2 months to find someone else to marry, or else she has to marry Matthew. So her and Matthew go about both trying to help her find someone to marry. But Daisy soon realizes that she's completely wrong about Matthew and that he's actually exactly who she wants. But Matthew doesn't want to marry anyone because he's scared for them if he does. And, this book, guys, is so good. It's also the only one in this series that has the woman make the first move very strongly. Daisy, she sees her man and she's like, dude, I'm getting with you. And I love it. I love Daisy. I love Matthew. This book and this book are totally tied, which makes sense. They're both 5 stars. But I can't decide which of the Wallflower men that I like the best or the women because, wow. So great. So great. All right. The next series by her I want to talk about is the Hathaway series. So, oh my gosh, this was the one that got me into the reading binge of Lisa, because I picked up Mine Till Midnight to read like 2 weeks ago now. I was just wanting to get through some of my Lisa Kleypas because I want to do a deep dive on her, and I haven't read enough of her books to do that. So I picked up this one. So this series takes place about 3 or 4 years after Scandal in Spring ends, and we get reintroduced to Cam, who is a half Romani, half Gypsy man who helps run Evie and Sebastian's club. So we meet him actually in Devil in Winter when he's a little bit younger. And this book starts out with Amelia, the oldest of the Hathaway siblings, who are in dire straits. Their parents have both died. They're running out of, resources. Her brother is the heir, but he's kind of a recluse and a rake and a gambler and all these things because he's dealing with some serious hurts in his life. And so she goes into town to find her brother. And so she brings Mary Penwith, who is Kev from Seduce Me at Sunrise, which I talked about that book. He is a part of their family. And they go to this gambling den to get her brother back. And they run into Cam, and Cam won't let her in, but he looks and doesn't find her brother. Says actually now he's went over to that whorehouse over there. And she's like, okay, Mary Penn, let's go get him. And Cam's like, what? You can't just go into the whorehouse. And she's like, yes, I can. I'm going to go get my brother. And Cam's like, no, let me help. And so they go through this experience together. He's very attracted to her. He kisses her, and then they part, and they don't think they'll see each other again. Of course. So then a couple weeks later, Amelia and her family are out at their family home, which is completely dilapidated and falling apart. And Cam is there visiting his friends at Westcliffe's home. I think it's called Stonehaven. I can't remember the name of it. And they run into each other, and she's like, oh my God, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm visiting my friends. What are you doing here? And they have this amazing interaction, and he's like, okay, this is fate that I'm supposed to meet you because I've met you again and I'm so attracted to you and I've never wanted anybody so much. And Cam begins a systematic wooing of Amelia. And Amelia, none of it has to do with prejudice for her. There are a lot of people prejudiced against Cam because of his heritage. And also the Romani are prejudiced against him because he lives in the English world and he earns money and he's very rich, and they distrust him for that. They think it's wrong that a gypsy or a Romani should own things. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. But the Hathaways, like I said, they have Kev lives with them and has been with them for a very long time. And so she's not prejudiced against Cam when she finds him because she's used to that. And it's hard to explain. Cam is he's not controlling, but he's very persuasive in a good way. I don't know how to explain this, but if you've read this book, you know that Amelia, again, she has had to hold everything together. Her family could slip through her fingers. She has younger sisters that have no hopes or chance of making it good in society if they can't get their family home put together. And there's just so much standing in her way, and Cam just wants to help. He just wants to take the burdens. He wants to make her his tribe. He wants to just wrap her up and take care of her. And I mean, not wrap her up. He's not like, I want you to sit on a shelf, I want to do everything. But he's just like, I'm here for you. Let me take some of your burdens. And oh, geez, it's so good. It's so good. Cam is the sexiest, most everything. Everything. I love him. I'm still talking so long, guys. So then book 3 is called Tempt Me at Twilight. And for this one, we have Poppy Hathaway, who is the second to youngest sibling. She has now had a tutor for a while because things get cleared up when Cam becomes her brother-in-law. Spoiler alert. And now they have been tutored. They've been groomed a little. Her and her youngest sister have been able to be in society, and they're still pretty odd. She ends up catching the eye of Harry Routledge, who we've heard of before because he owns a hotel that we have stayed at previously before. And he's a ruthless businessman. So Poppy has feelings for another man, and he is kind of a weak sauce type of dude, though. And he knows that his father wouldn't let him marry Poppy, and so he's afraid to tell his father about her, even though he does genuinely love her. Like, he's not trying to mess around. But Harry decides that he wants Poppy. And so he goes about means to make that happen. And he ends up breaking up any possible chance she has of being with this other man. And then he gets her to marry him. And then she finds out, like, not future-wise, like right now, finds out what he did. And so she says, I hope you're okay with the fact that I'm never going to love you. And he's like, I don't need you to love you. Love me. I have you. That's what I need. And oofda, like, oofda. Is that an uncomfortable place to start? But oh boy, is it good. Oh boy, is it a joy. Because Lisa has this thing, guys, where she can take a hero and he's a villain. Like, they call him a villain all the way through this book. And I was here for it because I love a villain who gets a happy ever after. And I love that Harry saw what he wanted and he took it. And then he has no idea what he took because this woman is amazing. But this book was so good. It was so good. Then the fourth book in the series is called Married by Morning. Now we finally have the tale of the rakish heir, Leo, who has been causing us problems since the first book in this series. And since the second book in the series, he's been having some tension with the governess of the girls. Her name is Catherine Marks. And they have had this run around each other for the past couple of years. And then they have a moment with each other. And you know the moment I mean. The moment that happens in all historical romances where things escalate. And Leo needs to get married within a year and have a male heir for his family to keep their home. There's a whole bunch of details that go with that. You'll find it in the book. And so Leo needs to stop screwing around because it's more than just him who loved this home. Cam fixed up this home. Cam fixed up a lot of things. Mary Penn, he has worked on lumber production and different projects around the house. He runs the estate. It's where Wynn is most happiest in her life. One of the daughters. Beatrice, all her animals live there. Like, there's a lot riding on him saving their home for them. And so he needs to find a wife. And he's not sure he wants to do that with anybody else but Catherine. They have such a steamy hate to love, guys. Like, their hate is so good. Like, their contempt for each other has been built up through the books. And I love that because then by the time we get to this, there's a history that's built in that you couldn't get to in just one book. Like, you couldn't do that all in just one book. But Lisa has planted it through the other books. And oh my word, it is so sexy and amazing. And this book as well just made me cry because Catherine, she has some secrets that she's hiding that she feels won't make her an appropriate match for Leo. And she wants to give him, she wants him to be successful and have a happy life. And she doesn't think that she would be the right option for him. And it's great. 5 stars. So there you go. You see why I only wanted to talk about the 5-star ones in this one. I hope you enjoyed these, recommendations I have for these. Again, like I said, any of those books that I talked about in the beginning, if you want more details on them, either check out my Goodreads or leave me a comment and just say, hey, can you explain this book more deeply to me? I would be happy to give you some points without spoilers about like why I liked it or didn't like it. And yeah, that's how I'm going to try to do these from now on so that I can go in more detail about the books that I loved, because that's what I want to be doing with you. So thank you so much for watching the Book Refuge. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week. Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell to find out when I upload. And you can watch some more of my videos right now.